So our next speaker is Michelle Allen. She is the Senior VP and Chief Human Resource Officer for MEMIC. I would consider her to be an inclusive leader. She strives to create environments where teams, individuals, and organizations can grow and generate positive impacts beyond what seems possible. So please put your hands together for Michelle in the next portion of our conference.
Oh, thank you, everyone. And thank you to everyone who has joined us up on stage so far. I know that for me, this has been a very thought-provoking afternoon. So really grateful that I had the time to pause and to be here with all of you. And so today I'll actually be moderating a series of short TED Talks by some really impressive folks who operate within our community. I'm thrilled to be here today as a representative of MEMIC as well, who is a key sponsor for the event here today. We believe in the idea of fostering strong and inclusive networks and building meaningful relationships within our communities. This is what creates safety within our workforce, right? We've talked about this quite a bit today. It's resonated a few times, this idea of psychological safety, where we all live and work, and how can we create that? And we believe that that's the foundation to safety, and that's why we're here. And so I'm really excited to be able to present each of these individuals who will be coming up on stage. They'll be doing 10-minute segments, so brief topics, and I think it's going to be rapid fire and a lot of fun. So please join me in giving each of them a warm welcome as I introduce them to you today. So our first presentation is going to be Tae Chong. He is the Director of Multicultural Markets and Strategies at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. He is also a valued member of the Inclusion Maine Conference Steering Committee. Tae is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert with a keen focus on multicultural markets, marketing, and workforce strategies, particularly here in Maine and in Northern New England. So Tae will be sharing insights on relationships and first jobs in alignment with our networking event a little bit later today. So really excited to be able to welcome him up to the stage.
So we all know that first jobs are critical, right? Right out of college, it's life-changing. And for me, I was a Bowdoin College dropout. I worked my way through college, working nights at Jordan's, and I worked at Portland Housing Authority. That was my first college job. The other thing that's important is the relationships you build with your first professional job, right? And so for me, it was Mike Wilson. And Mike Wilson allowed me to work at Kennedy Park Study Center, and he gave me space to go out and try new things. And one of the things I found out was a lot of the kids who were coming to Kennedy Park were immigrant refugee kids, and they were being tracked into ELL programs. And at the time, all the kids in the Portland public school system, especially in Portland High School, they were all in the basement of Portland High School. They never came in contact with any other kid, any other students. And so some of the African and Asian kids didn't even know that they could even play track or basketball or soccer because they didn't come in contact with anyone. And because he allowed me to go out and talk to these kids, I discovered that injustice, and then I actually work with NAACP to sue the Portland school system to change ELL so that kids can go out and try out for all these different after-school programs, and they could also determine their own future by testing out of ELL. And so, thank you. Thank you. This is the next, what's the next? So, one of the things I did was, we've got 70,000 college kids in the state of Maine. 14,000 are kids of color. That's a pretty remarkable number. If you think about it, in 10 years, we have as many kids going through our college university system as we have people being employed in the state of Maine. We've got about 750,000 people working in the state of Maine. We have 700,000 kids in 10 years that could be going through our college university systems, and 140,000 of them are kids of color. And, the thing that I want to talk about as far as an injustice for me, or kind of our failure, is the first generation kids. The first generation kids, what happens is, most of them happen to be 60% are women. A lot of them are caretakers. They're either caring for their kids or their parents. They're working their way through college. But the thing is, 40% of USM students and UMaine students are first generation. On the aggregate, if you include Bowdoin and all the other private schools, it's 32%. And what's happening to them? Well, they're not doing very well when it comes to graduation rates. If you look at first generation versus multi-generational kids, about 60% of them don't end up with a college. They drop out, right? And 27 for first generation, for non-first generation kids. And the disparity is even bigger when you look at the graduation rates. When we look at graduation rates for college kids, multi-generation kids is 80%. That's pretty good. But for first generation kids, it's 60%. And when you look at that number, it's you're like, oh, it's only off by 20%. But for first generation kids, think about all the barriers that they have to go through to even graduate. And when you look at the disparity between kids who graduate and kids who don't, the difference in income for college graduates versus kids who have some college, the difference is $1 million over their lifetime. And it used to be that if you had some college or if you had an associate's degree, you could kind of bridge that gap, but it's not anymore. The economy has changed. And so, we have almost 250,000 people in the state of Maine with partial college degrees, and a lot of them happen to be first generation people. And a lot of the first generation people, like I said, are women, also people of color. So at Bowdoin, at USM, 25% are kids of color. A lot of these colleges where they have first generation kids we're looking at is that particular population. And this is a really significant number. If you are a first generation kid, you have all those barriers, you are 92% more likely to drop out of school than a second generation or multi-generational student. That's a remarkable statistic. And that gap has a rippling effect, because if you're a caretaker for your elderly parents and for your kids, you're creating a system where they're not going to feel like they can get out of that particular, track. And, it all comes down to relationships and connections and mentorship. And it also comes down to, jobs. Your first job really sets the stage for so many things, especially for first generation kids. And, one of the fastest ways to really change the career track for kids, especially first generation kids, is internships. And it's not a heavy lift. And this is where I want to spend most of my time and talk on. 72%, this is just for USM, right? Of all the kids who take internships, 72% are multi-generational kids. Only 28% are first generation kids. And Maine Career Catalyst is a program out of Focus, Maine, where 85% of all the internships are from private schools and only 15% are from public schools. And then if you take that 15% from public schools, 72% are multi-generational and 28% are first generation. Why is that? Because the reason why multi-generational kids can get internships like my kids is I coach them. I tell them this is how you can get your first job. Networking is everything when it comes to the business world or getting your first professional job. And if you are a first generation person and you are the first one to go to college from Calais or from Rooster County, or you're a multicultural person, you don't know that internships are going to open doors for you. And the thing that is the bottleneck, the barrier, is we have really good intentions from CEOs that want diversity, they want inclusion, and they want belonging. So they'll say, get me diversity and inclusion and belonging. But then the hiring managers and the middle managers say, well, I have to do these projects and I don't want to disappoint the C-suite. So they come up with standards where they'll say, all right, we're going to get that African-American kid that goes to Harvard but lives in New York. I'll check all the boxes. And that's what happens is, the standard is so high for internships that first generation kids don't have the resume writing. They don't have the ability to do well in the internship interviews. So they're left behind. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't hire kids from, Harvard and Bowdoin, all that stuff. But if you want to shorten the gap, if you want more skilled workers in the state of Maine, Maine employers have to figure out how to come up with internships, not as a way to do projects, but to expose more kids into the corporate culture. Because when more first generation kids are exposed into the corporate culture, you change culture's mindset. It all comes down to, for me, everything in DEI starts with one word: empathy. If the C-suite people have empathy, not just for DEI, but for empathy for first generation kids, low-income people who want to get their first break, that empathy changes their culture. Now they're going to look for other ways to be more empathetic. And when you are more empathetic, you're going to find more ways to make sure that people feel included and feel like they belong. And if you tell them the bar is this high, as opposed to, we want you to see what our world is like, and we want you to help us change our environment, that is the core of everything that we're talking about, right? Culture only change when the masses tell you what they need. And the people who are being left out are first generation, young women, multicultural populations. They're the ones who are being left out. And you cannot change culture if those people are never included or part of the conversation. And so I challenge all the businesses to think about doing internships differently. And the reason why is that when you do an internship, and this is from USM, 98% of all the kids who go through an internship have a positive experience. Their median income is $55,000. And the other piece is that you can see for first generation kids, even if they do graduate, and about 60% of them do graduate, only 79% get a college level job or college, college degree related job. And then it drops even more for other types of statistics, right? And so what it really means is that half the kids who are first generation, because they have a 92% dropout rate, half the kids who are first generation, they're the ones, the first ones in their family, they're the hope for their family. Half of them don't even make it. And when they don't make it, they end up making as much money as someone in high school. But then they have that narrative where they tell the next generation, it's not worth it. You shouldn't take on those loans. It's too risky. It didn't work out for me. That's 250,000 Mainers who are having that narrative right now. And as colleges expenses go up and up, it's going to be more difficult to get first generation, especially those who didn't make it, to encourage their kids to take out a bigger loan and then try to invest in their future. And the last slide is this. When you go through an internship program, someone with an internship program has a 90% chance, a higher chance of getting a job than someone who doesn't have an internship. And the other piece is that when I was talking about relationships and connections, 85% of all the jobs that are available right now are unadvertised unless you happen to be in a building where you're working for a corporation. So MEMIC will have internal postings, Spurwink, all those people. If you're an intern, guess what? You get to find out about that. If you're a first generation student, you don't get to hear about 85% of the jobs. You're competing for 15%. And if you're competing for 15% and you don't know anyone in that business and you don't know how to prepare yourself for that interview and you don't have any connections, what are your chances? That's another barrier and obstacle that we are providing for about 40% of kids at USM and UMaine and 30% of kids in the state of Maine. If you truly want, equity and belonging and inclusion, you have to think about how can we shift our mindset to be more empathetic rather than saying, this is what we expect and these are the barriers. And the good news is there are plenty of internship opportunities. We just have to figure out how to get first generation kids not to self-select and not applying for these internships. At USM, there are about 1,400 internships, but only about 200 get filled. We have to figure out, we as a community have to figure out how to get more first generation kids to apply, because we know if they do, they have a 90% chance of getting a job. And if they get a job, that transforms an entire family's generation. And the other thing is that Commissioner Johnson has rolled out an internship program where they're offering up almost 80 hours of internship, paid internship programs for anyone in the state of Maine. All these small businesses can do that, but we just have to figure out how to rewrite what we expect. I mean, what can you really expect out of a college student in 8 weeks? What we should be expecting is, how can we find a way for you to feel welcomed and for you to take a chance with us rather than you jumping through hoops to work for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Tay. I think many of us in this room who work with internship programs are now going to be going back to the drawing board and rethinking some of the ways we've been doing that business, and also thinking about our job postings, right? So some really good tactical advice for us, and also empathy. Wow, wouldn't that go a long way in the workplace? My tagline is, let's just bring some humanity back. That'd be really nice. So now we're going to move on to our second presentation, and I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome Stephanie Trice-Gill to the stage. I'm hoping she's here. I don't know if I can see a raise of hands. Maybe there she is. Excellent. So Stephanie serves as the principal recruiter and founder of IntWork, and is also a respected member of the Inclusion Maine Conference Steering Committee. Through IntWork, Stephanie is dedicated to bridging the skills gap by connecting employers with top, work-ready, BIPOC and immigrant talent, including English language learning and credentialing. Stephanie today is going to spend some time with us sharing insights into how you might envision your own success. And so excited to welcome her to the stage.
Thank you. And I've got to admit, I'm a little nervous tonight. So I'm going to start by asking you to introduce yourselves a little bit. First, I'm going to welcome all of you. And if you hear your language being spoken, I want you to shout back welcome in your language, okay? So, bienvenue. Bienvenue. Bem-vindos. Bem-vindos, good. Bienvenidos. Boyei bolamu. Merhaba. All right. So thank you. Since that just got some of you, I'm going to ask you to also introduce yourself a little more. I'd like to know who you are. And so when I say I'd like you to stand up if this reflects you. Stand up if you're an HR professional who came here tonight looking for talent. Stand up. If you're an HR professional tonight, don't be afraid. If you're an HR professional, came here, okay, good. Is all of you? A few more? I know someone from the school district over there. Come on, everyone. If you came here looking for talent, stand up. All right. Thank you. Stay standing. Now stand up if you've ever felt like your talents or credentials were being overlooked. Stand up. Stand up. Yes. Great. If your talents or credentials have ever been overlooked, stand up. Now stand up if you've ever felt excluded, sidelined, or left out. Just keep standing. Stand up if you've ever felt left out. Have you ever felt left out? All right. Well, those lucky people still sitting, I envy you, but I'm really excited to see how many. Just look around for a minute. Just look around. We need each other. And there's a lot of synergy and potential for transformation in this room. Thank you. Now sit down. You may sit down. Sorry, I didn't know. So I'm Stephanie Trace Gill. I founded a company, Intwork, that matches Maine employers with talented, diverse professionals through jobs and internships. And we also now offer outplacement if you have layoffs, and we have a table in there. So I hope to meet more of you in person. I started Intwork because I became frustrated with meeting so many talented people who were working in cleaning and home health jobs. Clap if you know talented people working in low paid jobs. Yes. Even though they were trained scientists, accountants, even HR professionals. And you might think, well, they might have had a language barrier. No, I'm talking about people fluent in English, working in jobs way below their credentials. The only thing they shared was they were not from here and they were Black or brown. And that overshadowed all their talents, and it had to be changed. One of the first matches we did at Intwork was placing an Angolan geophysicist who had been cleaning hospital floors in a job with a team of engineers cleaning the ocean floor. I'll tell you, his confidence and his income skyrocketed. And he was a very happy man to make that shift. Intwork has now been around for 5 years, and we've developed a database of thousands of talented individuals and placed many of them in their dream jobs with Maine companies. Of those we've placed, 50% are from Africa, 27% from other continents, and 23% from the US. And while I'm proud of having introduced life-altering opportunities to both candidates and their employers, we're all here because we know there are thousands more diverse job seekers not finding opportunities, and hundreds of employers who aren't finding qualified talent, right? So that's why many of you are here tonight, to find talent or to find a job. I'm excited about this talent reception. How many are excited about that? Yeah? Woo! Let's face it, this room is full of frustrated HR professionals wanting to advance DEI and hire diverse talent. And tonight's talent reception will be full of diverse job seekers who have experienced the painful squandering of human capital that drives people like them, who are usually full of hope when they start their job search in Maine, away from our state. That's right, people are leaving again for places that promise to empower them with jobs in their field, places like Texas, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. This room, but thankfully, you're all here. Everyone in this room is still here, so we want to empower you to help you find what you need. I should mention, I believe in manifesting what we want. Several years ago, the Maine government put out a call to the universe saying, we need more people. Well, did that happen? Did that happen? Yes. The world answered with busload after busload of eager new workers from Angola, Afghanistan, Congo, Ukraine, and Latin America. A few years ago, I remember when Hamza Khan had this idea of bringing people together. And now we're at Inclusion Maine for the 3rd year in a row. Let's give Hamza a hand. Like the previous speakers said, envisioning what we want is the first step, dreaming. So tonight, I want you to take a moment to envision what you want to leave tonight with. Is it a job? Is it a new employee? Is it a new perspective? Take a moment. Close your eye. I want you to picture in your mind exactly who you want to meet and what will be the outcome. Be as specific as you can. Form a picture in your head. Just take a moment. Close your eyes. What do you want out of tonight? Out of this conference? Picture it. Great. Did you get a chance? Was that long enough? Did you get a chance to get a picture in your head? Okay, well, because you're here, I'm going to guess that if you're hiring, you imagined a BIPOC person, which means that's who you'll find and who you'll hire. But did you know that most employers imagine a candidate who looks like them? Studies have shown that HR professionals are more likely to imagine someone who looks like them. And with a majority white HR leadership in Maine, we know what that means, right? The built-in bias that comes with most of us, preferring someone who looks like us, sounds like us, went to school with us, has a name that is familiar to us, a name that we already know how to pronounce. There's a bias against looking at a resume. HR professionals and hiring managers are more likely to put a resume to the side for later if they don't know how to pronounce the name. So what does that mean for diversity efforts? This makes it very hard for diverse candidates to get in the door. So really coming here and envisioning seeking out someone different than yourself is a tried and true practice for opening yourself to diverse candidates. Now, when that candidate is in front of you later tonight, please remember to show curiosity for things that are new to you. If you're not sure they have a skill, ask. As part of immigration, most foreign trained professionals converted a multi-page CV to a one-page resume to fit in, which means that most of their skills and experience are not on their resume. So if you don't see a specific skill, keep your curiosity and openness alive. Learn to pronounce their name instead of asking them for a nickname or a new name. How many people do you know have changed their name because they wanted to make it easier for other people? They wanted to fit in. Yeah, that really resonates, I can see. So learning to pronounce someone's name, picking up that resume, even when you're not sure how to pronounce the name, that's getting over that discomfort, and that's essential. In doing so, you'll be evolving and opening yourself and expanding your circle of understanding and compassion and connection with others by maintaining that openness and curiosity. And you'll be you'll also be someone that diverse candidates want to work for. I also want to remind you, if you see someone's resume and you think overqualified, just think how much more you'll be adding to your team. That overqualified thing with foreign trained professionals, we have people in the room who have hired overqualified foreign trained professionals for roles and then found that they were just so lucky they get those extra qualifications. Get ready, because when you do hire a diverse candidate, get ready to have a lifetime of myths and biases get busted every day. It's the real life DEI credentialing, life experience. And job seekers, candidates, those of you out there and those of you arriving for the reception, I know you're nervous about getting discovered and frustrated it hasn't happened yet. Here are some tips that I hope will empower you. Never start with apologies nor excuses. Be bold, be confident. Don't put yourself put yourself down or be overly modest. Project who you want to be. Believe in yourself and don't lose hope. Look for that open door, and when it opens, please, please, please walk through it. I can't tell you how many times I see candidates back out of an interview or a job because of fear. If you're not sure the job's for you, go to the interview and find out. Do your best. Get the job offer. You can always turn it down, but don't walk away from the opportunity you've been dreaming of. And employers, if someone walks away and backs out of an offer you're making or an opportunity, please pursue them and ask them what's making them step away from your opportunity. Imposter syndrome is real, particularly in a place where no one else looks like you. And we lose people unnecessarily because of it. And employers and job seekers, if you don't find what you're looking for tonight, come to IntWork. We can identify what might be holding you back and work hand in hand to find a way forward. But tonight, my heart is hopeful. I'm hopeful about the power of this conference, this collective, of people coming together, of making new connections. I believe in synergies and in the seemingly elusive match that you each dream of. May you be empowered and achieve your dream. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. And some more really great advice, I think, for all of us as we navigate this evening. Really looking forward to that next stage where we get to meet and have some conversations and look for those connections. So now we're halfway through our TEDx talks here, or I think the coined, I hear. So for our third presentation, we're going to be welcoming Aisha Khan, who is the program manager at Maine Health and esteemed member of the Inclusion Maine Conference Steering Committee. And is she in the audience here? Excellent. I see her over there. Terrific. Aisha has tremendous experience with various community organizations, including the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center. Joining Aisha is Peter Osborne, the Director of Educational Services at the Maine Municipal Association. Do we see? There he is. Excellent. We're all here. And another valued member of the Inclusion Maine Conference Steering Committee. And so excited to have them join us up on stage for their talk.
Check if it's working.
Is this working?
Perfect. Seems good.
Beautiful.
All righty. Hi, everyone. I'm Isha Khan.
I'm Peter Osborne. Super excited to speak with you this afternoon. I guess it's evening now, technically.
And is this the right? Perfect. All righty. So Peter and I met about 2 weeks ago-ish, and we're asked to kind of bring our talents together. So Peter has extensive experience in education, and I'm dabbling into what workforce, healing, and really wraparound services look like. So today, what we thought would be best would be to introduce perhaps a few frameworks around professional development that really center around education and from a lens of healing and development.
The reason we really wanted to focus on this topic is we spend so much time at work, right? And when that's really good, it's really good. Sorry, we're getting some. Oh, you're hitting the wrong button, apparently. The green button. All right, we're not giving a talk on how to use technology. But we spend so much time at work, and you know, your well-being and your professional development are important parts of that relationship with your work. And we wanted to offer some frameworks and some practical tips to promote you know, well-being and professional development amongst your employees. Because it's great to recruit diverse talent to your workplace, but then if you're not supporting them once they get there, then what's the point, right? So we wanted to offer some tips, and we're going to kind of start at a systemic level and kind of work our way down to the individual level.
Exactly. So one of the frameworks that I've always found really helpful is the iceberg model. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And one of the reasons we wanted to bring this is because today, I think as we all come together here, we see those inequities, we see those challenges. And one thing this conference does really great is introduce a lot of data and new ways of thinking. So this, we hope, is a framework that you can gather all that existing knowledge that you know, plus add on all the great work that you're hearing today and use that for something larger and that can be sustainable. So this model right here is looking at an iceberg. So if you think of an iceberg, you are seeing about 33%. Everything under the 77% of an iceberg is underwater. So that really shows, if you apply that to a person or to your work or your environment, is that you're only seeing a very small percent of what is happening. So that event. Adding to that is this data and patterns and structures that really tell a larger story. And to really have a more sustainable and long-term impact, I think Julia had mentioned that transferable and transformative change has to come from a mental model. So shifting our beliefs and ideology to really have a long lasting. It doesn't really matter where you start, but if your end goal is to have a lasting impact, we're going to help you walk through what I model. And later you'll hear Peter talk about the hope model that can help with this transformation.
Great. So let's think about applying the iceberg model to a workplace. So we can go on to the next slide, Isha. If we look at what's kind of visible, what's partly visible, and then what's invisible in your workplace, with the visible things that everyone sees are kind of the norms and behaviors. How are people acting? And sometimes when there's a need for change, that manifests in things like high turnover or kind of suffering business performance, disengaged employees. Did you know that only 30% of employees are engaged at work? That's a really dismal number. And hopefully by promoting well-being and professional growth and professional development, we can collectively increase that number. If you kind of get below the surface, though, you start looking at some of the less visible aspects that indicate a need for change. And that could look like stagnant innovation, leadership underdeveloped. Have any of you hired people into leadership positions because they were really good individual contributors and then you just kind of do sink or swim strategy? Either everybody's asleep or nobody's had that issue before. Yes, right? So it's not a great strategy, right? So it does indicate a need for change at the organizational level. And then some of the invisible things that we see when there is a need for organizational change are a misaligned culture and strategy. You can see that often. We were talking at our table earlier about kind of performative actions that organizations might take around equity and inclusion, where they may say one things and do another. So that's kind of one of the invisible underlying aspects related to a need for change. No clear understanding of values, of organizational values, and also a resistance to change. If you have a lot of employees who are resistant to doing things differently, that is an indicator of a need for organizational change. So these are some of the things that you want to get a good handle on in your own organization. What are some of the norms and behaviors, but also how do you drill into some of the less visible or even invisible aspects related to a need for change?
Absolutely. So as we're thinking about this from a professional development, what we've done here is done the iceberg model into what professional development may look like. So oftentimes when we're thinking of development and professional development in particular, it's always those certifications. What is that degree? What does that look like? But that is, a very tip top small portion that perhaps is visible on a resume. But there's a lot more when you have the employee working for you. What are some other ways to think more deeply about it? And one of the ways through what we've heard throughout the, I think a few presentations ago, was that introduction of internships and those who are already here, like loaned executive programs and things of that nature can really help one, get a sense of belonging, introduce those familiar skills and transferable skills, and at the same time, build up the employee's own skills themselves. But that kind of stays like within the four walls of the actual organization itself. The inequities that have led the individual to not having that certification, to not having those economic, to not having those internship models or opportunities is really even beyond the four walls of the place that they're working. And a lot of that has to do with social drivers of a individual's health and their well-being. And that's also something that we wanted to focus on. So what responsibilities do employers have when we think of development towards adding a value and providing healing and wellness? So if you look at this middle portion, that's still not the core of it, but just like that, underneath that developmental programs, the social drivers of health is something that I get to work on a daily. And one of the things we notice when we're looking at what is causing adverse health outcomes, it has to do with where the patient or the individual, and that applies to both patients and employees, is where they live, where they play, where they learn, as well as their access to food, housing, transportation, utilities, intimate partner safety. All of those things are adding to that professional development, right? How developed an individual is ready. So thinking beyond the four walls is something that we're encouraging that can really then have a lasting impact on those mental models. And Peter's going to talk a little bit more about what that model may look like in terms of having a more hopeful thought in sustaining and having resources that go beyond the individuals when they're at their workstation, but can really stay with them and be transferable to their work and professional life and providing that sense of balance.
Yeah. So just to add on to what Isha was saying about aspects of well-being, if you have somebody who's not feeling that you're supporting their well-being, you're also not going to be able to encourage them to pursue professional growth or professional development opportunities. So they're really pretty closely intertwined. If we move down, all the way down to the hope theory here, which is really about the individual. So we started with the systemic issues or systemic factors related to well-being and professional development. And of course, we had Charlie here and we've got the hopeful sign here. So we couldn't not talk about hope theory. But this is really the way that it's kind of a framework that as employers and as supervisors and organizations, we can support each individual in identifying their goals, identifying ways to support them and encourage them to move toward those goals, and also identifying pathways to move towards their goals. So those are all three really important aspects related to motivation and hope theory in particular.
Perfect. So now we want to introduce another idea, which I think all of you are well familiar with. And we've been talking a lot about equity in this room with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we want to walk through that idea and introduce slowly the concept of justice in this framework. So what's really exciting about this is when I was asked to present with Peter, is I myself as a young professional get to benefit from those or have access to a lot of these professional development opportunities that perhaps others may not. So I think when we're starting from at least those who are in the workplace, we're starting from the sense of equality, where if there is an opportunity, oftentimes it's open to all those who may be qualified for it. However, if those socioeconomic factors that we both highlighted are not there, then you're expected to somehow reach these opportunities that are available for everyone, when in fact they are reserved for those who are able to really, who are closer to those identities, as Stephanie mentioned, being able to introduce those opportunities to folks that look like those who are offering those opportunities as well. And one thing I'll just add here is, as we go through the next 2 or 3 slides, just pay attention to how the tree itself here, which kind of symbolizes opportunity and hope, how it's tilted one way and how to reshift by tilting it back to its to a center point. So equity, I think here is representing where folks, even though still we know the system is tilted, but what can we do to keep adding new opportunities? So adding those footsteps and tools and increasing the ladder. But as an individual who is in these workforce development and wants to gain from it, keep climbing the ladder is a challenge. It's exhausting. So while this being here in these spaces, it's great to talk about equity and to be able to benefit, it is still very exhausting as individuals who have to keep climbing the ladder, and it's seen as a accommodation or something to be grateful for. So this here kind of represent that struggle to reach. It's not just someone is handing BIPOC and LGBTQ plus and those who are disproportionately impacted another opportunity, making it easier, but that exhaustion is real. And that brings up to the last slide I have here around justice. So the opportunity we have for both allies and those who are disproportionately impacted to play a supporting role. And here you can see being able to leverage your support and have that equal feel, not equal in the sense of the first slide, but have that sense of belonging where no matter where you're standing, you're able to have that reach. And that really comes from this idea of justice, that we have to really go down to the mental models and have those really structural changes need to be corrected before we can actually feel that exhaustion, not feeling belonging. Even when you're at the table, you can't bring your authentic self. You're constantly code switching. So that is kind of adding to this picture right here. And the last thing before I leave it to Peter to close out is oftentimes when we go back to this equity where we have all these resources around diversity, equity, and inclusion, oftentimes when I'm in the audience, I'm getting to hear about examples of, BIPOC women or hijabi women or this or that. They're often examples about myself. And however, I don't always see instructors that represent me, right? Instructors are typically, we have coined or tokened white women, middle-aged white women to provide these. There's nothing inherently correct or incorrect about it, but it is when we talk about these opportunities to sit in the audience and be granted this opportunity to learn about how I look and feel by someone who's not representative is, again, exhausting. So when we think about these opportunities that you all provide, think about who is your audience, because oftentimes, even if we stay at equity, if we stay at diversity, equity, and inclusion, what ends up happening is we're providing tools and opportunities to those who are already privileged. And it's not really adding, it keeps adding the exhaustion until we truly understand and have a space where a sense of belonging and justice can be introduced.
Just to add to that and to go the equality slide, right? Equality would be saying, well, everybody who works here has access to professional development. But if everybody's not engaging in professional development, then we still have work to do. It's not working, right? And so one of the ways with individual employees that you can really try to promote that development is to think about hope and the hope theory. Is anyone familiar with this at all? Oh my goodness, nobody.
No.
Oh, one person, two people. Yeah, sorry. But working with individual employees, I think the first step you really need to take is to get a good understanding of who are they as individuals and as professionals, and where do they want to grow? Where do they want to go? What do they want to achieve? That's the goals and the aims that we see on the right side of the slide. That's really the first step. And then you have to pay attention to both agency and pathways. So what's their energy? What's their motivation for moving towards that goal? That's your agency. And then do the employees know how to move toward that goal, how to get there? That's your pathways, right? So it starts with having a conversation, really understanding what their goals are, and then thinking about how can you support them in having the motivation and the energy. Are you providing financial support for them to engage in education and professional development? That can be a huge barrier. Are you providing support for them if it requires transportation or childcare for them to engage in professional development? Are you requiring people to do professional development outside of normal working hours? Are you encouraging them to actually do it? Are you helping them to understand what the end goal of that development would look like? That all relates to agency. And then finally, with pathways, do they know how to access? Let's say you provide funding for professional development. Do they know how to access that funding? Do they know where the funding is? Do they know what's required? Do you require a certificate of completion or a certain letter grade? And or are you requiring them to pay for it out of their own pocket up front and then reimbursing them after the fact? That's another huge barrier. Are you developing partnerships with educational and training providers where you can give somebody a warm handoff? You know, if they haven't been in school for a while, it can be kind of intimidating to go back and continue their learning. So can you help facilitate some of those warm handoffs? And are you developing internal programs? Isha mentioned earlier, some leadership development programs, internships, apprenticeships, things like that. Are you developing pathways internally that people can kind of dive into and engage in professional growth? Those are all some things you want to think about when you're talking with individual employees, but also thinking about your programs as they pertain to professional growth and professional development.
Yeah, so as we conclude, one message that I would want to leave with is anytime you're creating a program or working on professional development, ask yourself multiple times who is benefiting. Because oftentimes programming is built or made as seen as neutral. And we know there are no neutral policies, there are not no neutral programming, they're not neutral anything. So there's always a beneficiary. And ask yourself who is the beneficiary and your intended audience. If they're not the beneficiary, what steps can you take to make sure that they are the intended beneficiary along with the other employees as well? Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was excellent. So thank you, Isha and Peter. Again, another thought-provoking conversation, especially when we think about these ideas about the way powers or the way paths and all of that. Really, really powerful stuff to be thinking about as we formulate our career pathing programs in all of our organizations. And then thinking about who our beneficiaries are. I really, that to me is, that's a powerful moment to stop and really consider what our impact is when we're attempting to solve for, which is often a place where I find that I can get stuck. And so I really appreciated that. So we do have one final talk this afternoon before we move on to our big networking event. And so our fourth and final presentation, we are honored to welcome virtually Leah Smiley. She is the founder and president for the Society for Diversity. Leah will be leading a session on diverse talent networking and relationship building tips. Very timely, given that as soon as we're done here, we're going to break and move into that networking session. So hopefully we can see her up here on screen. Hi there, Leah.
Hi.
Technology, don't fail us now.
Can you all hear me? Yes, okay. I see some of you can hear. Can someone enable screen sharing? Okay. So I am Leah Smiley, president of the Institute for Diversity Certification, and I am so excited to be here today and talk to you about a very important topic, that is diverse talent networking. And I want you to think about this from a different perspective, namely, how can you do this better? So I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and I want you to engage as I am asking questions. And certainly, if you want to do a raise of hands, that would be great, just so that everyone can see where you are. But certainly, I'll just do a brief introduction of myself. I am Leah Smiley, president of the Society for Diversity. I'm in Indiana, and I am so glad to join you in Maine today. I have had an incredibly long day. I am planning for a funeral two of my kids' graduations, and I'm working on an accreditation application as we speak. So I have been pulling 12-hour days for the last week and a half, and I am totally excited still to be here. I have been featured in Inc. magazine, Fortune, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, and I have also been featured in a variety of different periodicals and am considered to be a LinkedIn All-Star. I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Today, I am here to talk about this exciting topic of building relationships. So some of you may have a phone on the table. Look around and see how many phones are on the table. Just take a look. Okay. Now, think about this. How many of you picked up the phone during breaks? Instead of talking to other people, how many of you actually picked up the phone and started doing this during the break instead of talking to people? Now, I'm not going to tell on you, but certainly I want you all to think about why you did that. Right? I just want to think about the why. And what we want to focus on today is being present, right? So I want you to think about being present and in the moment, especially as you're at this conference. So I'm going to have some things to say. One, put the phone down. And this is hard to do because by habit, we're like, do, right? And this thing is stuck to our hands, right? We go like this and it won't fall. But I want you to put the phone down. It's not going to blow up or explode. It is not attached to your hand. I can take it and move it to the next hand like this. Yes, put the phone down, okay? I want you to make it so that you are looking at people and engaging at people and smiling, hello, at people. Then I want you to use social media the right way. You have a digital footprint. Be mindful of what you post and repost because there are folks who got a lot of time on their hands, right? So they're going through every single message that you posted for the last 7 years. Some even go back further, 10 years. Now, if you have done this yourself on other folks, stop it. Okay, stop. But certainly be mindful of what you post. Don't get into virtual fights with other people. Show compassion. Make it so that you try to see things from a different perspective, right? Use social media the right way. Step outside your comfort zone. It is uncomfortable interacting with people today. Why? Because we're not used to it. And we're going to have to get uncomfortable being in this state of discomfort. And I know that's difficult, but we're asking folks to interact with other individuals who are diverse. And in order for us to be a proper model, we have to step outside our own comfort zones. Now, next, I want you to make the time and take your time. What does that mean, Leah? It means don't ramp up to 100 after knowing a person one day, right? So that means you're not going to act like someone's your best friend or your sister after you met them a week ago. Excuse me. You just met them. For goodness sake, take your time. There's no rush, okay? There's no rush. Take your time. Okay, so last, be committed. That means do it regularly. Don't make it so that you network and put your phone down one time. I want you to make a habit out of being committed to this thing called networking. Now, when we talk about networking, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. networking can be defined as the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. So when we're thinking about networking, naturally, we may have biases, we may have fears, we may have doubts about ourselves because we're so focused on ourselves today. But I want you to focus not on yourself, I want you to focus on the process and on other people. So take the focus off of you and start thinking about others. How do you do that, Leah? I'm so glad you asked. The process of building a better network consists of 3 different things. First, I want to say that your network should be as diverse as your lived experiences. So each and every person in this room today has diverse or different lived experiences. This makes you valuable as an individual. Your lived experiences can help somebody else. And you have to see it like that. You have something valuable to share. You are valuable to others, right? So I want you to think about it from that perspective. Now, because you're valuable, I also want you to think about how diverse your network is today. How diverse is it? Right? So I want you to think about who your friends are and who is your go-to person. Does the person have the same background as you, the same lived experiences as you? Do they look like you? Right? Do they speak the same language as you? Do they speak the same native language as you? Have they traveled to the same places that you traveled? Are they interested in the things that you're interested in? So as we're talking about this, it requires you building new skills, right? New skills. That is challenging from a lot of different perspectives. And that's why I talked about you being uncomfortable, because it requires you to grow. Now, as you think about having a diverse network, you may have to understand live. Now, you don't want to rush to somebody's house, right? Because they may think that you're going to hurt them or that they may have an opportunity to hurt you. So be careful here, all right? But certainly when you're talking about getting together as friends, as a group of friends, instead of saying, hey, let's go to a restaurant and spend a whole lot of money that we don't really have, let's perhaps do a pitch in and go to someone's house for dinner. And let's think about making a cultural meal, right? And let's make it so that our pitch in is related to something that may be your specialty or something that you enjoy, right? And make it so that you see how other people live. Because there are some people who say that they have a diverse network, but they've never been to diverse people's homes. Not anyone here, not you all, just other people, right? So we're going to pretend like it's other people, not you, no one here. You've all been to diverse people's homes. You see how different people live. And you also understand that this is a no judgment zone, right? If we're building relationships with people, we're not going to pass judgment on how they live. We're going to understand that living can be different. Now, as we think about these networks, we want to really conduct a stakeholder analysis. Most of the time, we have friends and people in our network whom we're interested in. That is the beginning of your stakeholder assessment. You need to have individuals in your network who are influencers and those who are decision makers. Why, Leah? That's such a great question. You need to have influencers because they can influence other people on your behalf. You need to have decision makers because they can open doors for you that others may not be able to open. Those people who are perhaps interested. So those people who are interested may be in the same bucket as you. And you need to have a diverse network of people, which means that you need folks who have power, right? Those people who have authority, those people who are influencers, right? So that means that we're going to expand our network and do an analysis of how we need to build relationships with those who fall into those other buckets. Now, and you don't have to make it so that you're thinking about becoming best friends with the CEO of ExxonMobil, right? Because that is unrealistic. But perhaps you could become friends with people who are small business owners, and who are growing their enterprises in your town. You could become friends. You can serve on perhaps a board and become friends with perhaps executive directors and other decision makers who are on the board with you. You can volunteer to serve on any board. If you're not aware of any boards, contact your local United Way. One of the things that you could also do is you can think about how you can attend different events that are publicized. There are a host of different events that are publicized, but sometimes we're not present and we're not paying attention, so therefore we don't know. But I want you to step outside your comfort zone and think about this whole area of how to get out there and build your stakeholder groups. Next, you want to build trust. And I'm going to talk more about that. But trust is a fundamental aspect, and it requires that you are authentic. That means I am who I am, regardless if I'm with someone who's white, black, purple, or green. Right? I'm not going to pretend to be something that I'm not. I'm not going to assume the personality of the people, the personalities of the people that I'm with. Right? I'm going to be authentic. If I'm white, I'm going to say, hey, I'm white. You know, I'm the white person. If I'm Indian, I'm not going to try to say, hey, I want to be like individuals who are white. If I am Hispanic, I'm going to say, okay, it's okay if I speak my language in front of the people that I'm with. If I am whoever, this is who I am. I'm authentic. Finally, we want to have self-awareness. Self-awareness means that we understand how we are perceived by others. You have to gather feedback, right? So if you're a person who says, hey, I'm direct and that's just how I am, right? So then you wonder why don't I have any friends? Because you're direct and you don't want to change, right? So sometimes we have to think about utilizing different ways. So part of this conversation about diversity means that we too practice some of the skills that we want others to acquire. So what that means is if you are someone who is right brain dominant, perhaps practice being left brain dominant once in a while. Or if you're someone who is really social and outgoing, perhaps spend some time being quiet and listening to others once in a while. If you're someone who is perhaps introverted, perhaps you can try being extroverted. Or if you're low context, meaning that you are direct and to the point, practice being high context, meaning that you take the time to ask, how are you? How's everything going? And not being offended if someone says, hey, let's get together again. Really low context people are like, oh, shoot, you want another meeting? You want to get together again? Doggone it, these people, they like having meetings, right? So us low context people, sometimes we get annoyed by people who are high context. Practice doing both, right? Do both. So I want you to gather feedback and understand how you are perceived by others. Finally, as you're engaging with people, I want you to think about all of the different things that we talked about. Be authentic, be accountable. It's okay to say sorry. Don't be sorry for who you are. Be sorry for what you do. There's a difference. If you make a mistake, it's okay to say sorry. Practice storytelling. If you don't tell stories well, practice storytelling in the mirror, or if you have a Generation Z person around you, practice telling a story in front of a Generation Z person. They will be brutally honest, okay? If you have a kid, a grandkid, yeah, tell the story in front of them. If they don't laugh, or if they say, that was corny, you know that's bad. Improve it. Do something selfless where you have nothing to gain. Laugh, not at others, but laugh at different things. Think about accessibility. If you're inviting someone to go out, make sure you do the forethought where you don't necessarily have to require somebody to tell you, like, I have a disability. Make it so that you're thinking about drinking that may interact with someone's medications, or even walking for a long period of time, or hiking, or something that requires strenuous exercise. Being mindful of those things, even loud or dark environments, or doing activities at night. There may be some people who may not be able to see that well. And certainly because of that, they may not be able to go out and do things at night. Make sure that you actively listen. Actively listening means that you're going to ask questions. You're not merely repeating information. We're in a knowledge and experience economy. And I want you to think about caring about others, not just caring about others, but caring about yourself. Self-care is just as important, right? President Roosevelt said, no one cares about how much you know until they know how much you care. Dr. Martin Luther King said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. Think about serving others and doing things for others. Get involved on those boards and make it so that you are thinking about how you can volunteer at a homeless shelter, that you can understand different perspectives and get to know different people's situations. Think about volunteering also perhaps at a food pantry, or giving away all those clothes that you can't fit anymore and you haven't been able to fit for the last 20 years. Think about all the different things that you can do to serve others. Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you've done, but they will never forget the way that you made them feel. Again, thinking about those experiences. What are other people's experiences with you? Is it positive or is it negative? Are you always negative, looking for something bad to say? Or are you thinking about, hey, you know what? The glass is half full. It's not half empty. With that, I thank you everyone for participating today. And I hope that you got something valuable from my talk. And I look forward to interacting with you on LinkedIn, connecting with you on LinkedIn. And again, you can also look at our website, www.diversitycertification.org. Have a great day. Bye-bye.